this is the last of our anatomy lectures. So we're looking at leaf modifications, ways that leaves can kind of change their function to do something different, rather than to have their main design or structure be for photosynthesis. So the first one of these we'll look at are traps. So a leaf can be modified into a trap if a plant is nutrient limited. This happens in like bogs or tropical systems where there's a lot of water that moves through, removing dissolved nutrients from the soil. So plants can be really nitrogen limited, or it can happen in places where there's a weird soil type, like serpentine soils are kind of common in our area. They happen in places where there's been this uplift of ancient compressed marine sediments that then has worn away. So you get these coastal mountain ranges that get worn down and then expose these serpentine soils. Serpentine soils are tough for plants because they contain a high amount of magnesium and a low amount of calcium. Plants see those two elements as the same, so they'll often uptake magnesium instead of calcium and get magnesium toxicity. The other difficult part about serpentine soils is that they have a high concentration often of heavy metals like chromium and nickel, commonly found in those soils. So it's really difficult for plants, but they're nutrient limited. There's low nitrogen, low phosphorus, and low calcium. So to solve that problem, some plants have adapted carnivory. They're not technically using those insects as food. They make their own food by using sunlight and carbon dioxide. They use those insects as a source of nutrients, calcium, nitrogen, phosphorus, things that are limiting in their soil. So often these modifications we see are the leaf. So here we have a leaf blade that has been modified to be a trap where there's 3 little hairs, and if an insect triggers those little hairs, then it closes and then slowly digests them. So our Venus flytrap. Here we have pitcher plants that have a lot of modifications to the leaf, as you saw in your lab. We have the trap modification of the leaf blade. We also have a tendril modification of that leaf blade, and then the leaf petiole has flattened out to become photosynthetic. So that's the phylode. There's tons of leaf modifications that I'll only cover some of, and there's a few more that involve carnivory. Like Darlingtonia is a really cool local carnivorous plant, and that has this pitcher-like leaf with a little cap on it. And then you'll also see around here sundews, which have tons of glandular trichomes, and that's how they catch their prey. Okay, other modifications, you can have tendrils. So we saw stem tendrils, and that would emerge from the place of the axillary bud on the top. We can also have leaf tendrils that would emerge from the bottom part of the node and either have a little axillary bud or an axillary bud scar. So this tendril here has replaced the leaf as a leaf tendril. That would be used for climbing plants. So that's usually going to be something that's in a low light environment that is trying to climb to a higher location. We can also have leaves that are adapted as sharp armaments. So we saw thorns as the stem modification, where it's in the place of the axillary bud. If we have the axillary bud, as is seen here, but then we have these sharps emerging from the lower location in the node, those would be called spines. If they emerge from the location of the stipules, those would be stipular spines. And I think Austin posted that in the lab. Okay, and so here we have a stem that is now performing the photosynthetic job, right? The stem is large and has lots of big flat surfaces. So this is called a cladode, as you saw in your lab. And cacti are specially evolved, so their spines are really weird looking, not very clear that it's emerging from the location of the leaf. Another modification would be storage. So this is a bulb where the leaves are fleshy and have evolved for storing starch, and these are generally going to be below ground. This plant, an onion, will still make leaves above ground that will look totally different and photosynthesize, but it also has these photosynthesizing leaves, or non-photosynthetic leaves, that store starch that are below ground. So that's a bulb. It has a short little stem, fleshy leaves, and then the roots would emerge from that. This little part here on the onion that you usually throw away, or I don't know what you do with it. I usually put it in the compost. That's your short little stem. You can have succulent leaves. So these are modified for water storage. True succulents will be able to free up water from their own tissues when there's no water available in the surrounding environment. They have specialized mesophyll called hydranchema for water storage. You can also have succulent stems. Here we see that phylloid adaptation where the petiole has flattened out and become photosynthetic so that these leaves can do other stuff. They're still photosynthetic, but they're highly divided into smaller leaves. So why this plant is doing that, I don't know. But usually it's because the leaf is doing another job. Okay, so that's all the leaf modifications I'm going to go over. There are tons. Plants do lots of cool stuff. So I'm pretty excited to go look through the organ modification lab and see what came out of that. So that's the end of the anatomy portion of botany. We're now going to move on into broader concepts of ecology and interactions.